We've already soldered one of the terminals onto a wire, and now for this video I've done the rest of them. You can see that each of these has one spring terminal and one button terminal, and the 36 centimeter wire has a button terminal and a spring terminal on each respective side. The next step is we're going to solder these terminals onto these acrylic pieces that fit inside of the tubes. There are a bunch of ways we've kind of looked at doing this, and I'm sure people will figure out progressively better ways to do it. You could use the high-sol E90 that we already had for other things, but that's a really slow cure time. So instead we're going to use this 5-minute epoxy. I happen to just get this stuff from the hardware store, but I think any 5-minute epoxy will work. So if you haven't used epoxy before, it's not too hard. I'm not using gloves here, but I might recommend doing that for other people. A lot of epoxies are carcinogenic, and so you don't want to get it on your hands too much. So basically we'll just spread it a little bit out here. Do that. That should be enough for what we're doing here. I'm going to put the end back on. You can use anything as a stirring stick. I usually like to just break off a plastic spoon, or you can use a popsicle stick. I'm going to mix it around a bunch until it gets kind of this creamy white color to it. I'm sure you can find a lot of other videos about how to mix epoxy, but it's not too bad to do. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky. These are going to want to fall off of the pieces of plastic unless we kind of hold them in place, but because there's 4 of them, we can't hold them all in place at once. I think I've sufficiently mixed this now. I'm just going to take a little bit of a glob, kind of place it on the acrylic here. We tried using hot glue at one point also, which kind of worked, but it seemed like it tended to break off eventually, so I think the epoxy will hold better. You don't need that much. In fact, this might even be more than we need. It's good to keep paper towels handy. I think that'll be the case here. I'm just going to press this on. Yeah, and already I can see that I've put a little bit too much on. What I might actually do is remove a little bit. I always love things where you can make mistakes and correct them. So I've got a little bit of this. I'll wipe some off. This is going to get really messy, and there are people who are much better at keeping these sorts of processes more organized than I can. So I've got that one attached, and then I'll keep on doing it. So learning from what I've done, I'll put a smaller amount of epoxy on this, and then apply the next one. So this does have a 5-minute cure time, which means that it'll kind of get tacky and you can move things around a little bit. So that kind of allows you to generally place things where they ought to go and then move them around later. Another thing is I've now managed to get a little bit of epoxy on top of this attachment terminal, which probably isn't good. The epoxy won't be good for the conductivity, but hopefully we can sand that off later. So now I'll just do the other ones here. If you really wanted to be well prepared, you could have some sort of like wax paper or something laid out. But I'm doing a sloppy job and it'll do well enough. There is one thing to note. These plastic pieces have a small hole or a slit in the side, and that's going to allow wire to pass through if it's on the bottom side. So just make it so that the wire can pass through that. It's kind of hard to tell which one's the bottom and which one's the top. So just for all of them as a general rule, it's probably good to make it so the wire can bend over into that slot. Okay, and one last one. A little bit of epoxy. I even mixed too much epoxy. I didn't need to use this much. And definitely embarrassing myself. I've got a huge mess going on here. If I had been more prepared, as I'm sure you guys will be, this would be much cleaner. But that's it. So now I'm just going to watch them to make sure they don't slide off of place, that they're still centered on all of these. And in about 5 minutes they should be dry. So there's that.